So the Dutch not only built forts here, but they tried to make these people Christians. This church was the center for spreading religious teachings. Let's... Oh, wow. Unbelievable, man. Look at this. 1708. 45 years old. 10 months and 21 days. That was his age when he died. This was a governor. Oh, check this out. So this is yet again the VOC, but with an N. What on earth was the N? What was the N? Let's take our hats off. It's still a church, right? Look at these graves, 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 graves. Incredible. This is incredible in so many ways. The graves of the armies of the early capitalists. So what on earth was the N? So it was Amsterdam, Middelburg, Delft, Hoorn en Enkhuizen, and Rotterdam. So none of them starts with N. So I have a feeling, man, that this N refers to Naira. So frustrating. Back in 2006, the Dutch Prime Minister of the times, Jan-Peter Balkenende, referred to the VOC mentality, as he called it. And he said, why so serious? Why so serious? Why don't you just accept the fact that the Dutch of the times were people who could make it beyond the borders? I mean, completely bypassing the blood and the murders. I remember hearing this on the news, actually. It is an equal feeling of annoyance, the one I feel at the moment. Hi. Anyway, see you later. Bye-bye for now. Let me bring you here. Bye-bye for now. Besides Fort Nassau that we saw yesterday down at sea level, if you climb a very little hill and extremely close to the old Fort Nassau, is the major fortification of this island, which still stands in remarkable conditions. It's called Fort Belgica, constructed by the Portuguese, taken over by the Dutch, and it was used by the VOC to surveil the seas around this here island, Banda, for potential smugglers of the nutmeg or for potential attacks. I understand that in the inside quarters of this fort, about 400 VOC soldiers were accommodated, ready for action, you know. It would also function as storage for goods and ammunition. It had around 50 cannons pointing literally to every direction, and it would overview all this area. It looks sick, man, doesn't it? It also helped as defense against locals who were revolting. Because remember, the VOC came here and destroyed all competition, including the locals who were living here and living off the nutmeg till that moment. I'll be damned, man. Which locals suddenly found themselves without the possibility to cultivate anything for themselves, you know? Everything was under the monopoly of the VOC. I think it was called extirpation tactic, getting rid of anything that is not ours. What on earth is this, man? This is small. Bloody hell, this is tight. Right. So it's not completely impossible, but it's tight as hell. Right. We did it. Whew. Yeah. So the other fort, Fort Nassau, that we passed by yesterday, is right down there. The difference is kind of striking, isn't it? All right, we have seen enough of these horrible VOC constructions, I guess. I find it so funny that the road lights have the shape of nutmeg. This was the house of the Governor General of the VOC and the Dutch East Indies. It's called Mini Palace for some reason. It doesn't look so mini. It's called Mini because it's pretty identical but smaller scale to another palace which is in Bogor in Java. So it was once occupied by Governor General Jan Peterson Coen. Flipping hell, I feel a cold sensation on the back of my neck. So you won't believe what I'm reading here, man. So look at this. The Mini Palace also harbored Charles Rampley's heartache for his longing upon his homeland and family. He etched on one of the glass windows inside the center of the main building a message in French before deciding to end his life. What the Melancholic colonialists or what? What's happening here? This guy learned nothing from Jan Koen. Unbelievable. Let's have a look. So you realize that I'm dying to see that etched glass of the French governor declaring how much he misses Paris and the Moulin Rouge. So the message is this: when will my time of happiness come? When the bell strikes the hour, it's time for me to see again my homeland, the souls of my family who I love and bless. Colonialist governors had soul, man. They were soulful creatures. Now, probably this French guy really was that. I don't know what to say about Jan Koen. I don't know what modern psychotherapy would have done with him. Are these also tombstones? I mean, the colors are definitely Dutch or Russian, depending how you see it. It says begraven. Begraven means buried in the Dutch language. Witte leeuw, the white lion. What's going on here, man? Look at this. It's destruction. Indonesia. Look at this global perspective. We need that.
Mariam cannon.
From the sea.
From the sea, in what?
There. So this mark on the wall was made by a British cannonball. Makasih. Besides the fact that there seems to be no other tourists, it's me and an Indonesian girl who was with me on the small plane. We are the only two tourists. So we will try to go across the water to that island and hopefully to Run. If we make it to Run, man, I mean, I can abandon YouTube forever after that. The major goal of the channel would be accomplished. Joking. We still need to watch Celtic Rangers, right? I feel like the first Arabs or Chinese merchantmen. You know, the good ones. So look at that, you can actually see the lava flow from the most recent eruption. I don't remember when it was, but it's totally black there. Okay, Desert Trap is renewed in 1754. Look at this. The VOC made the stairs.
Yes.
So they gave something back to the place. So the darker one is better?
Yeah, the best one. This is number one.
Okay.
If the still white like this,
Yeah.
it's the second quality.
So this is not ripe, right?
Yes, still young.
Still very young.
And then this is we call the maize. Maize.
Yeah, the maize.
Maize is very expensive. Processed medicine, perfume, cosmetic, and also for coloring of Coca-Cola.
So this plantation was made by the VOC, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't from the beginning.
After they conquered this village in the 1621,
Yeah.
this forest,
Yeah.
they did pie to become the 6th plantation in this village.
6 plantations,
Six
and this is one of them.
Yeah, and after that they asking some rich people from the Holland too. We call the perkeniers.
The Perkenier, yeah, plantation owner.
Perkenier,
Yeah.
and then the POC relationship is not good also.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning it was full of gratitude.
Yeah. POC want to took a lot of money from there.
Yeah, tax.
Yeah. So sometimes they work together with the plantation slave.
Yeah.
And then they sold to the other buyer. They use the boat and then they sell in the night to the Sulawesi.
Bad Perkeniers.
Yeah, this is in the moon.
So this is what you dry and then roll it
That's right.
to become...
After that, we dry it in the sun and in the bark rolling by itself. This tree is native from Sri Lanka, yeah.
The Dutch fought really hard, the Portuguese in Sri Lanka, just to be able to do that, to steal the cinnamon and plant it wherever they could find a similar climate. There are 50 trees for each family of this village here in this plantation. As a local, the VOC would hang you upside down if they would catch you eating their nutmegs in salads. So imagine the future tourist, something like 300-400 years later, if humanity is still here, imagine them traveling to places like, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or whatever, to make the tours on the former oil rigs. Because this is how this thing feels to me at the moment. So the walnut tree was actually used to protect the nutmeg trees from the strong winds from Australia, the south winds, and provide shadow for the nutmeg trees too. So the VOC was very pissed at anyone who would dare touch the walnut tree. Hello. So this is Dutch grave?
Yeah.
Margaretha Martina Johanna. 4th of October, 1864. This is Hollandia?
Yeah.
Now it's a toilet for the cat. Covering the shitties? Look at this.
You're invading her privacy.
She invaded the fort. Wow, everybody here is carving something on this wall. So you see the low tide there, right? And the low tide makes it even more surreal, you know? So the Dutch built the fort over there to surveil this entire area. And a little bit more to my right was the bay that Jan Pieterszoon Koen first landed on this here island, Banda Bazaar, before he started his massacre. So it seems that this is Indonesia's favorite TikTok tree. People are making photos in front of it. Are we looking sharp or what? Goodbye, Hollandia Fort. Goodbye. All right, people, so there is a memorial here for the massacre of Koen. We talked a little bit when in the Netherlands about how Jan Pieterszoon Koen treated the Bandanese, partially because it was his way of doing things, partially because he wanted to take revenge for an attack that the Bandanese did on the first effort by the Dutch to establish trade with the Banda Islands. The local chieftains attacked the Dutch, and Jan Pieterszoon Koen, who was member of that mission, of that voyage, he escaped by pure chance with dear life. To commemorate the massacre of the Banda people by Governor General Jan Pieterszoon Koen on May 8, 1621. Portrait of the butcher. Check this out. Koen's sword. This weapon is believed to have been wielded by J.P. Koen during the conquest of Banda. It does have the symbol of the VOC on it. As a result of this massacre, the population of the Banda Islands, which initially numbered approximately 15,000 people, it is estimated that less than 1,000 remained. From those numbers, 40 orang kaya, the respected elders who were suspected of being the instigators of the rebellion, were arrested and chained and then executed by the Japanese Ronin samurai under the order of the VOC. 8 orang kaya were mutilated in 4 parts and the remaining 32 were beheaded. Those were the lucky ones, and stuck on bamboo poles and exposed to the people of Banda, who were left with only women and old people. The bodies of the 40 orang kaya were dumped in a well, known as the Put Van Koen. Well, there is a lot of nature now in that well, and for some reason somebody thought it was a good idea to make a souvenir shop called VOC. No, it's not called VOC, it's called Silu Bitang Estate, Nutmeg. It looks pretty neat. What is here?
This is a hotel.
Oh, it's a hotel.
Hotel.
That's why it looks so neat.
Yeah.
Aha, that explains everything. Thank you. Can I have a look?
Please.
Thank
We're
you.
going upstairs also.
Makasi. Let's have a look at one of the rooms. So with this hotel, you don't get the sea view that others have, but you have a volcano view, and you have also the Fort Nassau wall. These are the culprits, I guess. So check this out. This is the local myth for the origin of the islands. Before the Banda Islands were born, there was only one big island, a volcano. And after its eruption, the three brothers who were living on the big island took their families and rose up to the sky. After everything finished, the brothers flew down again, where they established kingdoms, and their children prospered until they met the VOC. Good morning, everybody. Today is probably the most exciting moment of our tour in the Banda Islands. Today we are going to the islands of Ai and the island of Run, Pulau Run, the by now very well known island which the Dutch traded with the Brits for Manhattan. The islands we will be visiting today played a vital role on the monopoly, the Dutch monopoly for nutmeg, on essentially the evolution of the VOC into becoming the monster it became. So bear with me here because there are 4 stages that describe the Anglo-Dutch Bandanese relations, starting from the end of the 1500s till the Banda massacre, till 1621. You see, when the first Dutch merchants ever arrived on these islands, that was, we are talking about before the forming of the VOC, it was all free trade for everyone. The Portuguese were here, some Brits were here. The Arabs and the Chinese were in the trade business with the local Bandanese long before the Dutch. It was like trade is supposed to be. Everybody could trade with everybody. As a matter of fact, there is this treaty that was signed, the Accord of Heemskerk, that kind of makes things clear in regards to the rules of trade of that period.
Local people are asking to the Dutch people, if you want a business with us,
Yeah.
you have to respect our wife, our religions, and then our woman. No, woman, culture.
Culture, yes.
Wife, culture, and then religion. The Dutch agree with that, but they asking local people to sold their nutmeg to Dutch, and then but the price they determine. The
Yeah.
Dutch determine the price of the nutmeg.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, the Dutch leader and then the local people leaders, they cut the piña, and then they drop the blood to the stone, to like signature.
Signature, yeah.
Stones.
In 1609, Peter Willems Verhoef arrived to the Banda Islands with a small army. He demanded from the local chiefs a total Dutch monopoly for nutmeg. And he came with guns and weapons to kind of try to force things. On top of that, he began building Fort Nassau, which I'm currently looking at, without permission, without first discussing anything with the local communities.
1 or 2 years later, the agreement is broken because the Dutch bought the nutmeg too cheap. Sold the nutmeg to the other buyer, Chinese, Arab, and then also the British.
Yeah.
And then after that, the Dutch angry, and then they wanna come here, and then they asking local people to make the second agreement. But the local people invite William John Verhoef into the forest.
Yeah.
And then they kill him.
Yeah. That was the first voyage when Coen survived. 7 years later, the British East India Company with Nathaniel Courthope, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his name, come to the Banda Islands and they sign a treaty with the local chiefs of Roon Island, which treaty still exists, by the way, as physical evidence for the nutmeg commerce of the island of Roon. And while all this was happening, the Dutch of the VOC were all over the Banda Islands with ships packed with cannons and arms and weapons and soldiers in order to manage to essentially capture the islands, this time completely bypassing treaties or contracts with the locals. While the Brits have completely taken over the island of Roon, the Dutch were coming for war. And this is more or less how the siege of the island of Roon began. This siege lasted 4 years, and it is probably one of the most remarkable events in, how should we call this? The first steps of capitalism. Now, the island of Roon has a pretty unique form as a rock, you know. There is literally only one place around the island that you can dock with a ship. All the other places are vertical slopes, so you can't really attack on all sides, you know. And the one side that could be attacked was ingeniously defended by Courthope's forces. This is probably the only reason why this siege lasted for 4 years. Nathaniel Courthope was a brilliant leader for the English forces on Roon. Not only did he manage to sustain the morale of his soldiers, remember Roon is a very small island, it has no resources. Those people were gathering the rain from the monsoon in order to have drinking water. And not only that, but they would witness the only ship that would be coming for their support being attacked and taken over by the Dutch. So you realize what kind of hit in the morale of you as a defending soldier this brings. The only way for the Dutch to manage to capture Roon was to lure Nathaniel Courthope into a trap. And this is exactly what they did. They spread rumors of a local Bandanese revolt against the Dutch in the nearby islands. So the moment Nathaniel Courthope decided to leave the island of Roon to go to the nearby islands and have discussions on how to combat the Dutch together with the locals, at night, mind you. I mean, imagine the greatest leader that the British forces have had in this area, sailing in a little boat in the middle of the night, right? It's kind of heartbreaking, come to think of it. So on that same night, the Dutch were waiting patiently, and when they spotted the lantern of the small boat, they started shooting. Nathaniel Courthope was shot dead and ended up in the bottom of the sea. I mean, his body was never found, but he did die in that ambush. Your army is as strong as your leader, so when Courthope finally met his end, the English resistance also ceased on the Roon Island. The island of Roon was taken over by the Dutch in 1620, and the Governor General of the VOC at the time, Jan Pieterszoon Coen, who had, as we said, skyrocketed in the ranks, gathers the fleet in order to attack the Banda Islands as a whole. And this is more or less how the Banda massacre happened. Jan Pieterszoon Coen's mentality was, we don't sign treaties, we take over. It is estimated that from the more or less 15,000 inhabitants of these here islands, something like 2,500 only survived. The others were either killed or used as slaves in various other places. When the Dutch brought slaves to work the nutmeg instead of the murdered locals, most of the slaves did not know how to work the plantations, so they resulted in bringing back local Bandanese. During this whole period, the Bandanese were sort of allied with the British. I mean, between the Dutch and the British were treating them sort of as equals. They wanted to sign treaties with them, while the Dutch were extremely eager to take over. On top of that, this informal alliance between the local and the British had kind of spooked Coen when he decided to move the capital of the VOC on the island of Java, what later became Batavia. He encountered the small fishing village of Jayakarta, as we have seen in the Jakarta video. He proved to be extremely suspicious of the local prince and his potential relations with the British, which made him go to Jayakarta with a big force from these here islands, from the Maluku region, to completely take over the small village. I mean, he burnt everything, erased it to the ground, and built a new city.
Boy, I cannot even describe what kind of a dream this was for me, man. Ever since I started living in Amsterdam, I dreamt of doing this sort of trip to Roen. And there are so many reasons why this trip was not possible literally a week ago. I mean, I was on a waiting list for that little plane that brought us here. And on another waiting list for the return. And the other difficult part is actually what we are doing now. It is supposed to be the monsoon season in the area of the Banda Islands, but yeah, that was another major stress, how the sea conditions are going to be. Look at this, man. This is the island of Ai. This is the island that the Dutch were conquering during the day and the Brits were taking over back during the night. So imagine Nathaniel Kortop's cannons from way over there where the little town is, shooting at the Dutch ships all over this archipelago. If you climb on top of the boat and you have a look where the volcano at Banda is, you can actually see its shadow in the distance. It's so imposing. If you were supposed to be choosing between Manhattan and this here tropical paradise, what would you have chosen? You see, after 40 years of constant warfare between the Dutch and the flipping English, they came to the conclusion of the Treaty of Breda, and they decided to each keep what they had already conquered. So for the Dutch, it was this here island, Ran Island, Pulau Roen. As for the English, it was New Amsterdam, which later became what we know as New York. And I will tell you the story about that name. Maybe not always as idyllic as we have thought. So here's the story. It was in the mid-1660s when the Duke of York, the one that essentially got knees deep in the transatlantic slave trade for the English, decided to punish the pesky Dutch. Because up until that moment, the mid-1660s, the Dutch were all over the Brits. I mean, the English. The same guy who was stamping his emblem on the chests of the slaves, you know, with fiery iron bars, that same guy decided to punish the Dutch. Hello. Hi. Hi. The locals are very curious about me speaking to the stick. So he took his English armada and went and conquered New Amsterdam, the island of Manhattan, you know? The same island that previously Henry Hudson had discovered for the VOC. And it was more or less at that point that the Treaty of Breda came about. So the only reason why the Dutch kept this island here, Roen, and the English kept Manhattan was because at that moment in time that was their territory. I mean, the English had conquered New Amsterdam and the Dutch this island here. Now for the Dutch, this was a wonderful end of the Anglo-Dutch War, the 40-year Anglo-Dutch War, mind you. However, they couldn't have imagined back then that first off, a pesky French botanist, Pierre
Poivre. That was the first guy to transfer nutmeg plants with soil from here, from the Bandas, to Mauritius or something, or Madagascar, I don't remember which island. And not only that, but some years later, also an English botanologist did the same. So the nutmeg was already out of the Banda Islands, and the monopoly of the Dutch was soon to collapse. On the other hand, the English have kept Manhattan, which at the time was a swamp, very good for trading beaver fur and wood, but not so good in anything else. However, the way things turned out to be was kind of totally different than what the Dutch had hoped. Now, after Jan Pieterszoon Coen and his army took over the entire Banda archipelago here, including the most remote island of Ran, he ordered for the nutmeg plantations of Ran to be cut off in order to prevent any potential problems in the future. Look at this. This is somebody's private quarters. He even has an electoral poster of some candidate. Those wells back there look fairly newer than that era, but I would presume that Nathaniel Courthope would probably use something similar to collect the rainwater. If we think that the initial price of the nutmeg and the maize that the Dutch were paying initially, the locals, was X, the final price that it would come in Europe would be hundreds of times that value. It's incredible. And the moment the VOC managed to eliminate that first small amount that was paid to the locals, you realize that they became the producer. Japan, China, the Spice Islands, India, Sri Lanka, Iran, Iraq, all this area was in an incredible network of commerce established by Jan Pieterszoon Coen in the first years of the VOC dominance here. And that is something absolutely impressive, not forgetting the crimes, of course. Look at all this garbage and all these chickens. What's happening here? That's a very weird fruit man. It's phenomenal. Goodbye, Rhode Island. Goodbye. Look at the captain bringing us to unknown shores. This is the island of Nailaka. You realize we need to jump in this, right? Look at this little fellow. We must return him to the sea. Swimming in that ocean was phenomenal, but the amount of garbage, man, it's heartbreaking. Welcome everybody to the island of I, which aims very high. All right, people, so look at this. This is essentially the fort that the Dutch have built to put all their prisoners from the skirmishes with the Brits, with the English. And that fort is called Fort Revenge. It's a very eloquent name. So this was the fort that they brought, for example, the prisoners from the ship that was about to aid the English at Rouen. Just a year before the siege of Rouen even began, the Dutch forces attacked the island of Ai in order to take it over, because the local Ayans were collaborating with the English. So he takes it over, but his force stops momentarily to plunder, you know? So it was at the same night that the English attacked and seized the island while the Dutch were asleep. A year later, and the Dutch return with a much bigger fleet, and they completely take over the island of Ai too. Now we need to talk about the torture, because the descriptions of what was happening in those days are hideous and terrible and atrocious, to say the least. What you are seeing here is literally the Guantanamo of the times. It wasn't only imprisonment of captives, hostages, prisoners, you name it. It was a place of absolute horror and torture for those people. But I like it so much that people are playing football now. On this piece of land of horrors and pain, I think it's time to leave the Banda Islands. I think we have seen enough. Yeah, let's go back to the boat. And we are back. So I will leave you for now to let everything settle and enjoy the moment. This was a massive trip that I wanted to make. I will see you later. Bye-bye for now.